Hello and welcome back to JLXP. We are here once again after day 4 of World Swiss, the 1-in-1 day where it was just an interesting day, man. Like the T1 GenG game, I think everyone was expecting this super high level game. I actually do think it was a high level game. I think the drafts were really mismatched, and I think GenG played perfectly, but we're going to be getting into that. We had an expected result with FlyQuest against Team Secret Wales. G2 really played well after a shaky opening against BLG, and BLG is in a lot of trouble now after being 1-2 with only facing NA and EU teams. And then, as an NA fan, just a really disappointing end of the day. 100 Thieves got absolutely blasted by HLE, but I'm going to be breaking down all 4 games in detail, going over the drafts, going over a couple of clips from both games. I'm going to do slightly fewer clips than yesterday, but with a little bit more detail. So I think that's going to be a better experience. And I'm also going to be assigning player grades. So this is something I did 3 years ago when I was doing Worlds recaps, and it generated a lot of conversation. Specifically, whenever I didn't give Faker a really good grade in a game that T1 was victorious, apparently it was getting posted on Korean forums and people were flaming me, which is fine. Because I just kind of want to create the conversation, and I think it gives a little bit of extra nuance to the game. Plus, it kind of locks me in when I'm watching, trying to figure out exactly what each player was doing for the benefit or the detriment of the team. So, without further ado, let's get into this first game where we were expecting FlyQuest to beat TSW. I think an interesting note about the LTA and the LCP is they are both combinations of previously separate regions. So, while technically this is the number 2 seed from the LCP, it's kind of the number 1 seed from the old VCS. So in the same way that VKS, as the number 2 seed from the LTA, is the number 1 seed from the CB LOL, depending on how you look at it. So if you're looking at this as a like old NA versus VCS matchup, while it's possible for an upset, you would definitely be favoring the NA LCS champions in this matchup. So getting into the draft really quick. In this one, the bans, I'd say today, Yunara definitely graduated to permanent ban status. Vi ended up being banned a lot, and today was a huge day for Sion. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about whether Sion is overpowered or whether teams are silly for drafting Sion, but to me what keeps happening is teams are really heavily telegraphing their dive compositions in the first couple picks with like Aurora Kaisa, and then teams are willing to lock Sion and then just building better front-to-back team compositions and also building durability in their later slots. Like nobody on this team from FlyQuest is super vulnerable to snap engage. Azir can build pretty tanky. Corki can play at really safe range with playing with rockets and keeping Belk up to run away. So after the original picks were done by TSW here, FlyQuest could just pick a really durable scaling team composition. I would say they were a little quick to lock the Sion here. I personally think you're still vulnerable if Trundle's available, because I think they could pretty easily still pivot to a Trundle here and have a decent time. Trundle's fine into Wukong, Trundle's great into Sion, and Kaisa can still scale as long as you have other things that can allow her to fly in, which they could still pick engage supports later on since Alistar is already there. So I do feel like they tunneled a bit on the Kiana, and that ended up dooming the team composition. The other thing with the Mordekaiser locked in, this is a pick that he had played before. I looked, he's played it 3 times this year, and it's also what Bwipo used into the Sion. But I don't actually like it here because when Bwipo played Mordekaiser into Sion, the other team had a support Nautilus who's pretty easy to eat in teamfights for a free kill. But if you look at the FlyQuest side, I don't feel like there's any champions that he can effectively ult and actually kill. I don't think it necessarily counters the Sion. I think it can neutralize the Sion a bit. But if you're not able to then kill someone in teamfights, I think the pick really falls flat. And we see that this game. In terms of the actual game, I would say it started in a very FlyQuest fashion. There was a lane swap. FlyQuest did overplay the bot lane swap a little bit where the Alistar Sion, which interestingly enough is a pretty good lane because you can chain the CC together, so you have a little bit of damage threat. So FlyQuest is like trying to play this lane pretty aggressively, but that gets them a little bit too low Bwipo ends up dying to a Kiana dive that's really well executed by TSW at the start of the game, and it gives 1 kill over. I don't think it's a huge blunder by FlyQuest, but it was just the one notable thing that happened in the early game. Another thing that happened in this game that FlyQuest, I think, does more than any other team at Worlds is they're just willing to give up all 3 grubs. And that's the clip that I'm going to be pulling up here, where it's 8 minutes and 12 seconds into the game. Bwipo is pushing bot lane, thinking about resetting, and he's going to end up canceling his reset as TSW is moving towards the grubs. But notice, this is the thing that FlyQuest does really well, is they fake pressure the grubs. TSW wants to fight all the time as a team. So they're constantly looking to create numbers advantages, and they're like ready for the fight the whole time. So the more that FlyQuest just kind of sticks around, keeping the right amount of range, the more time TSW is going to put into the play, and the more tempo and pressure FlyQuest can create. And FlyQuest does this really well. They did it really well in NA. They do it really well here. So TSW is just eating time. Mordekaiser's sticking around. He's not pushing waves. Aurora's hovering, so he's losing mid-push. Sion is consistently pushing in bot lane. FlyQuest then leave a little bit early, push the top lane really quickly. So they push all 3 lanes. Inspired kills grubs. And then, as you're almost sure that TSW has reset, notice Aurora's gone back to mid. Since the Mordekaiser showed top, FlyQuest can assume that Kai'Sa went back to base to deploy bot lane. So now, after the grubs are taken, not only does FlyQuest have tempo, they also have the numbers advantage. So that's when they really want to look for this fight. And that's exactly what Inspired does. He just kind of flies in, starts the fight, knowing they're going to have numbers here. Both ultimates get burned on him from the Kiana and the Aurora, which normally would be like fatal damage if anybody else was there. But since Mordekaiser's top and he knows Kai'Sa's not there, he's not in danger of actually getting bursted out. So he starts the fight, Quad flies in, they get the first kill. So yes, they gave up 3 grubs, but they gained probably 3 waves worth of experience, a plate bot, and a kill onto Quad. So just a really nice sequence by them overall. Later on in this game as well, Bwipo just played very well. I feel like Dire's Aurora was over-forcing for a lot of the game. There was a clip earlier, or a play earlier in this game as well, where he burned Aurora ult early in mid lane just for poke on Quad. Busio came behind him, got a kill. At 14 minutes, Bwipo just solo kills him because he was first on the wave. Dire's Aurora was slow on rotation, took a bunch of damage going to turret, and Bwipo can just solo kill him. So they just kind of generated these leads off of the tempo that they had here. I think Busio was absolutely everywhere in this FlyQuest game. His Alistar was completely on point. And they really just generated wins through macro. They never let the Aurora get going. Bwipo built a ton of magic resist early, so he was burst resistant to the Aurora. He was not losing to the Mordekaiser. And the rest of FlyQuest just ended up playing like a pretty standard game. They at the end of the day, they did still have to execute a fight. So I want to show one more clip at 28 minutes where I think Masu ended up playing the team fight pretty well. But as you can see, of all the things I was just talking about, where they're constantly pushing waves, they were constantly faking pressure, TSW just falls behind. So it's by 28 minutes, the Drakes become equalized. FlyQuest is up 5,000 gold, and we have this fight where it was still reasonably close because TSW is a really good team fighting team, but Masu ends up playing this one pretty well. So I'm just going to let it kind of play out here. FlyQuest starts Baron. It forces TSW in. Busio decides to kind of start the fight going. It's not the cleanest engage. Sion ends up kind of hitting no one. Notice on the top side, the Mordekaiser duels the Wukong. Does a decent job, but he's not going to be able to kill the Wukong within the ultimate. But I will say, at this stage in the fight, like, it doesn't look that good for FlyQuest. And Masu actually has to play really well to end this fight. Bwipo's backed away. You can tell Inspired's called to back out, but Masu and Busio see an angle. They kill the Mordekaiser. Bwipo lands a nice Q onto the Kai'Sa. They get the Otacon slow as well, and they can kind of just walk it down. So that, to me, was the last chance the TSW had to win the game there. You could see Kai'Sa at the very end of the fight did try and get a kill back on Amasu. Eddie knows that the game is mostly toast, but if he kills the Corki here, maybe they don't take Baron, maybe he gets a bounty, maybe they can keep playing the game. So I think it's worth trying to go for that kill. Doesn't get it. Quadra kill goes over to Masu, and it was just like overall a really clean game from FlyQuest. They won in 32 minutes. Busio ended 1-0-16, and I think for the most part, like, the draft was nice for them. I don't think it was an overwhelming draft win. I think FlyQuest, like they usually do, gave up a ton of early objectives. So they actually gave up first 2 Drakes, first 3 Grubs, as well as the first Rift Herald. And they trade up for it in lane. I think this is really effective against teams that aren't able to outlane them. I'm still waiting for them to draw up against another Elsevier LPL team because it definitely didn't work against T1. And I think that's going to be their weakness, is potentially they play too slow against the top teams. But at the end of the day, they're 2-1, so I can't complain too much. The grades I wanted to give away for this game, I gave Whippo and Inspired A's. So the way this grading scale is going to work is S, I can't really see much wrong with what you did. You played very well in a lot of situations. S plus would be like, holy crap, that's one of the best games I've seen recently. A is, you did well. B is, okay, you didn't like cost your team the game. Maybe you made a couple mistakes here and there. And then anything below B, I think either you were putting yourself in significantly poor situations, or D is like, man, you really had a whoopsie game. Okay, so Whippo, Inspired, Quad, I gave them all A's. I didn't think any of them did exceptional things in this game. I thought the macro was really good by the team, so I gave a macro score of S for FlyQuest here. A for Whippo, A for Inspired, A for Quad. I gave S's to Masu and Busio because I thought Busio was absolutely everywhere. He was 1-0-16 in an 18-kill game. So nearly perfect kill participation, engaged in most of the in the right times. And then Masu, he was the finisher in this one. He played really well in a lot of close team fights and was able to take them down. On the side of TSW, I didn't give them terrible grades, but I did give them a C for macro because I felt like most of the time they were just getting pulled in collectively to FlyQuest's stalling tactics. So I gave Heroes Mordekaiser a C. Part of this is because I just don't think it was the right slot to pick Mordekaiser, and I don't think a coach just like forces you onto a pick. I think he asks you if you feel comfortable in this situation, and I just don't think it was a good angle. So he didn't play terribly, but I think it was a bad slot to make the pick. I gave his to an A. I thought his early dive on Kiana bot lane was good. I don't think he misplayed many of the team fights. I just think the team was in bad situations. I gave Dyer a D. I thought the play he made bot lane at 14 minutes was really int. There were other fights in the game where he just like accidentally took the wrong side of his ultimate and died instantly. He had like 3 or 4 really big mistakes in the game and never generated the pressure he needed or the threat onto the backline in any of the fights. I gave Eddie an A and Taki a B+. I thought their bot lane actually played fine. Anytime they're in a 2v2 situation, they were good. They made a lot of the fights pretty competitive. But they were just too far behind from tempo. So overall, solid game from FlyQuest. Pretty happy. And that moves us on to GenG versus T1, which was supposed to be the Astro banger they've played so many times this year. But this one fell flat for a lot of people. I personally thought it was a really well-played game. I did say, as many people online have said, that this felt like an 80-20 draft. Like, that's what I wrote down. 90-10 because it's GenG playing the 80-20 side. But at the same time, like, T1 can play dive comps very well. They have a really good trigger pull. They haven't found much success with Aurora this year, so I think that might be a Faker thing, not being great on it in lane to get the necessary power spikes to really destroy people in team fights. And we saw that here. So there's this nice tool on Games of Legends if you pay for the analyst tier that I can look at every Aurora versus Orianna game this year, which has happened 76 times. So this is across all the games they have on Games of Legends. So it includes ERLs and tier 2, but it's just for the sample size. Orianna averages an 8.6 CS difference at 15 against Aurora, which in terms of Aurora's matchups in all the games, in all the matchups that have like over 50 games, it's the worst lane for Aurora. So with Orianna being first picked by Chovy, Aurora is a really hard lane that you're picking into right away. On top of that, in this draft, they do the early telegraph once again of dive comp with Aurora Wukong into Sion, so they can't pick a Trundle, and there's not really going back in terms of what they're committing to. So T1 just continues to all in the dive comp. I'd say the biggest mistake in this draft, outside of what happened in the first three, I think as Worlds continues, the early slam of Aurora Wukong like this, when Sion is up, it needs to stop. This is the most popular slot for Sion to get picked, by the way, is second rotation of blue side after the enemy team has jungle. It's happened 5 times. It's won all 5. Mind you, Sion's only lost 2 games at Worlds, but it's majority picked in this situation. And I think it's too strong. Letting the Poppy through is pretty criminal when they already have Aurora, Wukong, and Bessa. They throw a Lucian ban in here when really they need to be blocking the Poppy. Duro's support Poppy was insane in this game, but he's also set up to be insane. He can disengage. Like, for this team comp to work for T1, all 5 people have to be engaging as one. So if the Poppy knocks like 1 away, the engage is over. Not to mention, the Steadfast Presence can have effectiveness against literally every champion on T1. So the Poppy pick is absolutely smurf in this game. Again, Sion angle, too damn good. It's full dive versus insane team fight and scaling. And the Poppy support versus full dive is just too much value. It is good against all 5 champs. With that being said, the early game was very slow. This was a very... Okay, it ended 23 kills to 3. It ended at 27 minutes. It was a very well-played game from both teams. I want to emphasize this. The draft was strong, but once the game hit its tipping point, the way the drafts needed to interact with each other meant it was going to be a stomp. I don't actually think T1 made that many mistakes in this game. So, small advantages happened early game. Okay? The first Drake was conceded by GenG because T1 had good pressure in the bot lane. The second Drake was secured by GenG after Canyon ganked bot lane on a good timer, since Carrier's Alistar was mid lane to try and bail Faker out, since he was losing pretty handily to the Orianna in the 1v1. I did a 15-minute CS checkpoint to check on this matchup. So I said it averages plus 8.6 CSD for the Orianna. Chovy was up 27. And this is after he got 3-man ganked at 14 minutes and denied a wave. So it would have been closer to 30, which would have been 20 or 25 over the expected value. Now, with the average being 8.6, I think that clearly shows that the Orianna is favored in this matchup, and then putting that favored matchup in the hands of the best laner in the world is always going to exacerbate that issue. So I don't think this is necessarily like, oh my God, Faker wasn't playing great. I don't think it was Faker playing terribly. I think it was Faker playing average and Chovy playing exceptionally. Okay. This game really comes down to the first big fight, which happens at 17 minutes into the game. I'm just going to pull it up because there was a large tech delay, so I'm trying to get the right timer. 17 minutes into this game. Remember how I was saying the T1 need to have everyone engaged at the same time for this to work. GenG just need to play at a little bit of range and disrupt the dive as much as possible. So GenG, clear mid, move themselves into river. T1 is spread out as they need to be to get the dive onto the Orianna and the Corki. Those are the 2 targets that they want to hit. Okay, let's watch this fight. I'm going to play it one time. So sorry for you on podcast. I'm going to play it one time and then I'm going to talk about what happens. It looks incredibly one-sided, right? It looks like Faker runs in, ints himself away into a Poppy, and then everyone else on T1 just kind of flies in and dies. That's what it looks like. I will say, watch this combo. So Faker's Aurora, Owner's Wukong, Doran's Ambessa, they're all supposed to dive in together after Keria engages on Alistair. That's how this play is supposed to work. So Keria goes in, gets a 3-man knockup. What's supposed to happen here, Faker's going to ult in, Owner's going to ult in, knock everyone up with Wukong. Doran over the wall is also going to ult in and AoE them with Ambessa. This is a good angle for T1 to fight. But then Duro's Poppy from this bush sends Owner to Narnia. The Steadfast Presence, the Xin ult knocks them out a little bit. Steadfast Presence still up, so you have to be a little careful about why you fly in. Also notice Doran misses his Ambessa ultimate. Wukong gets shot away. Doran misses Ambessa ultimate. So yeah, of course Faker dies. But then watch the extension of this fight. Owner flies in. They still get a kill. They get Duro pretty low. Like, I actually think if this Poppy ultimate doesn't land, this is a really grouped up team for the Ambessa, the Kaisa, the Aurora who doesn't get one shot potentially since Wukong has knocked them up and stopped them from being able to chain spells. It potentially is a really good fight for T1. But I have to shout out Duro. Look at where he's channeling this Poppy ultimate. Like, yes, maybe you could think Owner should know that you're dodging Poppy. He has flash. Maybe he should flash to the side, E in. I don't think he sees it. So he's in the bush. T1's ward is around the corner of the banana. So I think this Poppy ult comes completely from Fog, which is crazy. And yeah, I mean, with how good GenG is and how mismatched the team compositions are going to be from this point forward, I think this clip was effectively the game. But I also think at 20 minutes, this is one of the best Otacon takes I have seen so far at Worlds. So T1 start the Otacon, which I think is the correct play. Yes, they're far down in the game, but if they don't do something, Chovy's just going to get further ahead. They have no one to answer the Orianna this entire game. Like, Ambessa's not doing it. It's a 2-item Orianna. 20 minutes into the game, already has a huge bounty, and Aurora can't stop him, Ambessa can't stop him. You just have to just hope that you get a favorable Otacon engage. But GenG just literally doesn't give them a chance for it to happen. They one-shot Doran at the start with Poppy. Again, Duro, perfect chaining of his abilities. Stun, knock up, Steadfast Presence. You cannot go anywhere. He's dead. But then even from here, like, GenG doesn't rush the Otacon when a lot of other teams, I think, would panic a little bit. They're patient. They make sure they push the bottom wave. And then Canyon stacks up his 3 talent strike on the Otacon. 1, 2, before taking his E back in for the knockup. Really well done. And then just kind of lets Chovy go to work. Notice this shockwave from Chovy on the outside too. Since he knows Guma isn't going to move down, since that's where everyone on GenG is, he just puts the ball up top, catches him while he's trying to E away, and just gets another one shot. So, I mean, if we really talk about the mistakes that GenG made or the T1 made in this game, it's like maybe they should have warded the banana bush a little bit better so that Owner didn't get knocked away. Because that was like a split second. That was like a quarter of a second that Faker would have had to react that, oh my God, my Wukong's not here. We can't full send. Because I think there's a chance T1 actually wins that fight at Drake. And then once that happened, GenG, like, I don't think there's anything T1 could have done to come back into the game after that point happened. I just have this last clip at 22:30 where, like, this is why the game accelerates. I think a lot of other teams that aren't T1 would play really defensively and just hope that GenG makes a mistake. But T1 knows that they're already outscaled. So the most they can hope is they just saw Chovy push top. Maybe he's resetting. Maybe we can get a fight without the Orianna. So Keria goes in. Ah, crap. Actually, though, Orianna's still here. I guess we lose. I think that's kind of how it ended up happening at 23 minutes. Game ends at 27 minutes, 23 kills to 3. Super stompy. But like I said, I don't think T1 played that badly. Grades, across the board, I give S's to GenG. I thought they played this game almost perfectly. S plus for Chovy, S plus for Duro, because I think they were the big difference makers. Chovy for the massive CS difference, and then Duro for the knockback onto the Wukong that I think ended the game. And I did not give anyone on T1 anything below a B-. I don't actually think they played that poorly. I think their team comp got outscaled. I think their draft was bad. I gave their draft a C, and I gave the draft from GenG an S. But, even Faker, B-, right? He was laning in a bad matchup against the best laner in the world, and I feel like his int play might have actually worked. Might have been their one way of winning the game if they don't get hit by that Poppy ultimate. So it's the first time in groups or Swiss history, 10 years of Worlds from Faker, that he's lost multiple games. So T1 now move to 1 and 2 and need to struggle their way out of the group. Moving on to what was the highlight of the day for many a G2 fan. Maybe not for me. I respect G2. I've made multiple videos about how they're such an insane Western team and how they close the gap. And I think they did a lot of the same things that I talked about here. A lot of it starts with draft. Like, just look at the champions that they picked here. They picked Poppy early, which, even though Broken Blade has played Poppy top before, I don't necessarily think BLG recognized that this wasn't just to support Poppy, which is what any of the LPL teams, I think, kind of lock it in as, is just going to be a support. So they freely pick Leona into a Braum. But instead, Poppy goes top against Cassante, which is a good matchup if you're good at Poppy. So because of this early Poppy pick, G2 gets a good matchup against Cassante. They get a good matchup bottom lane, and they get this pick that BLG is not going to be played against that often with the Anivia. Caps is going to be comfortable Anivia into Ryze because he has the outrange. He also has really good zone control against Cassante throughout the game, and they have the synergy with Anivia Poppy. So this is like a 9.5 out of 10 draft for me from G2. And I think it's just a normal draft from BLG, and I think they got baited by G2's flex picks. So really creative draft by G2. And nearly a disastrous game by G2 early on. The first clip that I have for this one is 6 minutes into the game, where there is a disastrous fight for G2 at the first Drake. The big theme of this game was objective setups, because even as creative as G2's team comp is, they have really poor engage. The Verisalt is probably the best thing they have, and then the Poppy wall Anivia wall into Poppy stun would be the other thing. But for the most part, they need to be set up at objectives, set up good lines, and then hope that BLG runs at them. So every objective, G2 is going to be willing to drop waves to over-prioritize objectives. And I did think that they did an interview with Hans Sama at the desk after the game. He even said, they kept giving up their tempo when they maybe shouldn't have, which I completely agree with. They were not using their tempo to be first on objectives and make G2 walk into them, because that's where this composition isn't going to work. So I think G2 really understood how they needed to win with these unique champions, and BLG did not. So let's just watch the early game, because I think even after 6 minutes, I still thought BLG was going to win. I thought BLG was going to win after this fight. G2 take the first Drake. Labrov is already pretty low, right? So G2's taking the first Drake, and they think, all right, let's run away. Ben then kind of loses his mind. He flashes in as a level 5 Cassante. On's Leona had already missed his Zenith Blade, so they can't follow up. Shadows and Narnia. This is not a combo that is easy to follow up on. So Ben has to back away. But watch this. It looks like Skumond ints, because he does, but it's because you can see, it's this empowered Varus Q. If that hits Ben, who just dodges away from it at the last second, if that hits Ben from Hans Sama, I think Ben dies. Skumond's going to get a Triumph proc. It's understandable that he'd re-engage this. They're a little low on mana. They have used their cooldowns, but they think it's 4v3, and maybe they're able to turn it. Obviously, the Q misses, so he ints. Shadow also had all his cooldowns because he hadn't been in the fight before. And then it's a really nice reaction by BLG to full send at the end of this fight. So they get the double kill. Then Knight just starts channeling his Rise ultimate. They're going for one more. They know Labrov can't fight on Braum. Caps has no egg from earlier, and they get 3 kills for none. The other thing that happened here is Hans Sama flashed in this fight. I don't need to show it, but he redeployed top lane. Bin was level 6 to Hans Sama's 5. They get a 4th kill. So like by 11 minutes, BOG is 2,000 gold up, 4 kills up, and I feel like it's going to be very hard for G2 to do anything because BOG can probably just set up first at all the objectives and win the game. But that is not what happens. The 12-minute fight is exactly how G2 want fights to look. Braum can block Kiana R, right? So he can stop the engages from being great. Also, the Anivia can definitely limit the mobility of the Cassante. So watch this. It is a bit of an int engage by Shadow for sure. I just kind of want to say, like, how does G2 take this position? BOG over-prioritized the bot wave. They let G2 kind of freely move into river, and then they decide to fight back. Like, Bin has teleport this whole time. He should have been down here helping them take space, in my opinion. But he doesn't. G2 get the Drake uncontested. Then they teleport in for a flank. As they're teleporting in for the flank, they're probably saying go, go, go. But they just full send Kiana R, Leona R onto Braum Shield. It blocks both. Fight's lost, man. It doesn't matter if you're 2,000 gold down. If you use that many cooldowns on nothing, you're going to lose. Bin is disrespecting them massively, still decides to full send into them. Nothing's going to happen. Like, Knight can't walk through Poppy. Bin dies. Bin has had a rough tournament so far. He had the int play against Dokla with his Rek'Sai, just giving a free kill over to Sion. And he's got stuff like this. He was a chaos. He was a menace in the first fight that they miraculously won, but he shouldn't have flashed in. And then he shouldn't have engaged here either. So Bin has had a horrendous Worlds against the Western teams. So gold's even now. Gold's even. There's no way this gold should have been even. G2's back. G2's actually advantaged after this happens. Next clip I want to go on is skipping forward a little bit because the game equalizes. G2 has pretty good control. There is a lot of back and forth. BOG is still going for a lot of scrappy plays. But 21 minutes in, there's this whole Otacon sequence. And it was hilarious. I thought Caps was inting, but I do think it actually ended up being a good play by Caps. Otacon's way more valuable than one kill. And just getting it off the map will make the game simpler as they're going for additional Drakes. So G2 dropped the Herald. Caps just essentially 5-man stuns everybody on BLG by hopping in the Herald. And more importantly, he gets Leona and Kiana ult out. If Leona, Kiana ult are used around Otacon, things can go really badly. But he gets both those things out. He allows them to finish the Otacon. Like, yes, he dies and burns his flash, but with the engage tools down for BLG, like, there's no way they can catch G2. They try realm warping in, but all of their major cooldowns are gone. So there's no chance. So just a weirdly awesome play by Caps. I still think this game is going to come down to the soul fight because BLG has bot push. They probably have a way of pulling off a decent flank. Maybe they can win a team fight here, but then BLG kind of lose their mind. Like, what is Shadow doing? I don't understand it. He just dashes over the wall. Like, I know G2 have control wards. So they don't see that many cooldowns being used over the wall. Maybe he didn't think that the whole team was there, but they're not anywhere else. Caps and Hans Sama show on mid, so maybe Shadow thinks, okay, it's only a Xin in this bush. But I don't care, man. Like, he hops over, loses stealth, gets stunned into the wall, and then instantly one shot. So they're not allowed to contest this Drake after this. It just gives Chem Soul over to G2. Really bad play by Shadow. A really bad play by Shadow. Ben had a couple whoopsies. Shadow had a big whoopsie there. But now with the Soul, I think this next fight is a masterclass from G2 on how to play this composition. So it happened 26 minutes and 50 seconds. It's another front-to-back team fight. They are 4-1 with Baron, so they don't even have the Poppy here. They don't even have one of their best disengagers, but that's how confident they are in this 4v5. One thing to note about Qiyana, I know it's been this big LPL pick, and it really struggles for the LCK. It's a runaway champion. I think when you're behind, it's really bad in defense situations, because the terrain in your own base is so limited. It's very hard to get good wall stuns. Not to mention the blades you can pull with your W. You have no river access, so you can never pull Water Blade for the root. And it's even hard to get Grass Blade when you're pushed into your base. Like, look at, he has to run all the way into his jungle to pull Grass Blade here for any stealth. Otherwise, all he can do is pull rocks. So you're really limited as Qiyana when you're losing. So even though he has like a lot of their gold, he's not effective. It just makes BOG even weaker. So, yeah, just watch this fight. Nobody on BLG can get through the anti-dive. So, yes, they use the Leona ultimate, but, like, okay, you're now going to walk through Braum Varus. Notice a really nice play that Caps made here. So, yes, he positions aggressively, but he does it while putting up the wall. So, he puts up the wall when on ults. Shadow, not only can he not get in, I didn't even see the first time the Caps threw this Q right here. I don't think Shadow saw it either. You can barely notice it, but it gets a stun. 1,000 range away, it gets a stun onto the Qiyana, just making it so there's a hard follow-up. Because, like, I think ideally, BLG's thinking, okay, Leona ult, Shadow can flash, Shadow can dash, slam him into this wall up here, and maybe we win a fight. But it gets completely disrupted by Caps' Anivia. So the engage falls flat, Bin tries to do stuff, really can't do anything. Redemption heals them up. Qiyana ult literally hits one. Caps uses stopwatch. It hits the Braum. Hooray. But the fight's already over even before Broken Blade gets there. And G2 wins. Like, great team comp. Really good team fighting from Caps. I do agree with Hans Sama in the post-game interview. They kept giving away tempo when they shouldn't have. You can see the end of the game right here. The score lines look acceptable. I think the 139 for Caps' Anivia doesn't do justice to how well he actually played in this game. Grades for G2, I gave Broken Blade an S. He wasn't involved in the first fiasco where G2 almost threw the game away, and then he got a solo kill once he had the Sundered Sky power spike onto Bin, which I think really gave adrenaline to the team and just helped them keep a lot of tempo. Skumond, I gave a B, mainly because of that early fight. Caps, I give an A. Hans Sama, EU fans are probably flaming for this because he ended the game with the most damage, 3,000 gold up, 4, 2, and 5. I gave him a C+. I think that first fight, missing that empowered Q that could have killed Bin, and then more importantly, getting killed immediately after by Bin could have been a big momentum loser. And like, if they don't get that next fight, none of the other things he does in the game matter. So even if he plays good for the rest of the game, I'm still not going to be able to excuse what I think could have been game-losing plays. I gave Lebrov an S. I thought his Braum shields were perfectly timed. They blocked all the important CC. He did an insanely good job peeling the whole game. I give their draft like an S. I give their macro an A. BLG, I wrote down C for Shadow and Bin. After doing this podcast and talking through it live, I would like to lower them a bit more. They cost their team the game for sure. I'm going C- for both Bin and Shadow. I think Knight played fine on Rise. I give him an A. I thought he skirmished really well. I think once he's in team fights, he's just hilariously outranged, so there's not that much he can do if they're not actually flanking properly. And I think it was Bin who was the one that wasn't in the right positions. I think, generally speaking, Knight was where he needed to be. They just weren't where they needed to be as a team. And I gave Elkanon both Bs. I think tough situation. I don't think there's that much more they could have done in this game. But now BOG is in the sadness chamber. They're 1-2 after losing to 100 Thieves in G2. So, number one seed of the LPL in China, backs against the wall. Good luck, man. That's more pressure than any other team is going to be facing for the next two rounds. Really, really curious to see how this team bounces back from some of these poor performances. Bin, in particular, has played so far below his level, he must be getting absolutely eviscerated by the Chinese community. There's no way they're being gentle to him. Shadow, he didn't play the first game. He got subbed in. They wanted the jungle honeymoon. He also played awful here. So they're probably going to swap junglers again for the next round. They're going to be playing nothing but best of threes from here on out. So who knows, man? Who knows? I'm not sold on BLG. But I will also say, if a Western team draws them in the 1-2, I'm still not going to be happy. Yes, they've lost 2 best of ones. They've looked bad in them, but they still haven't gotten their feet under them at this tournament, as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see what happens. All right. Last game of the day. 100 Thieves versus HLE was massively disappointing. I'm so sad, man. This game sucked. Again, Sion gets picked in the slot, the God slot. Pantheon, Talia, jungle mid, already locked in. Talia's a little bit less full engaged than Aurora, so I still think you could probably pivot to a front-to-back team comp. Teams also decided to play the Azir card today. It had been almost permabanned. It got through twice today. We'll see. They slotted basically, I feel like the Yunara ban replaced the Azir ban for a lot of teams, and it allowed Azir to come through. HLE finally did proper prep against 100 Thieves, which is really disappointing that teams are starting to take them seriously. Personally, very disappointing. I think it's good for the professionalism of top teams in the world that they learn what to ban against 100 Thieves. You need to give them that much respect. But Aurora, Vi, Wukong, I think are just perfect bans against them. Those are the 2 best dive champions for River to play. Aurora's the best champion for Quid. They couldn't have any of them, so they had to go to Talia. But once they pick Azir, Xin, Sion, and you already have 2 dive champions, there's not much more you can do, man. Like, maybe I would have liked to see Doku play Rumble here and then just try for a better teamfight comp, but they lock in the Cassante. To me, it's looking a little doomed. This means that they're going to lane swap. Weirdly enough, I know people flame the Senna into Sion. This is a very favorable Senna angle for FBI. He loves picking Senna when there is a possible lane swap because he can farm Senna stacks off of the enemy top laner and when the other team has a melee support. So it basically means anytime Senna is in a 2v2 or a 1v2 or a 1-on-1 lane, there is a low threat melee champion that he can farm stacks on. The only game that 100 Thieves won against FlyQuest in LTA playoffs was when they played Senna into a similar comp to this. It was against a Sion. However, in that game, I think they had Vi Aurora, so their dive and threat onto the enemy carries was higher. So they could erase the carries at the start of the fight and then slowly whittle down the tanks because they had a big numbers advantage. But I still actually think this is a fine slot for Senna in terms of what FBI's conditions are for it. That being said, this game wasn't close. Early game was a little funny. There was some vertical jungling that happened. River just didn't care that Braum was trying to push him off Raptors. It gave FBI some time to farm stacks. But there were 2 early fights that just went wildly in the favor of HLE, and I'm going to show them. And then because there's a Sion scaling, I think it made the rest of the game really difficult to play. So the first fight happened at 8 minutes and 30 seconds. After a few skirmishes happened, so you can see FBI already has a kill. Let's fight over the grubs, right? So 100 Thieves, they do feel like they have to force, which I think I generally agree with. I think they're going to get outscaled, and I think they're decently strong at this stage in the game. But they use everything on Xin, and then FBI dies early. So let's watch the fight play out. They start the grubs. As soon as Peanut approaches through the top, the numbers are pretty even. They realize they have enough damage to kill the Xin. Everybody flies in, and they take down the Xin. However, you may notice that FBI is now in the middle of the whole team, and he dies as well. I think the thing that went wrong in this fight is FBI, because the Sion is top, he pushes a little bit towards the wall against him, but then he gets too close to Peanut and gets separated by the Xin ult. I think if FBI is more towards the Sion and plays a little bit lower, potentially the Xin ult pushes him to the rest of his team, in which case they could actually set up a decent fight from this stage, backing up with their backs towards their blue side jungle, and maybe have a chance. But when the Talia is late and you're trading basically all your big cooldowns to kill the Xin, and you lose your AD carry, whereas the other team still has their AD carry, their Lucian with ultimate up, it gets rough. Then I'd say if River could have used his E earlier before he takes 3/4 of his health, that would have been pretty good. But he dies quick, and the fight just turns into an absolute disaster. Last thing I'll mention about this fight is maybe they could have gotten a lot of damage onto Viper right here. You can see Quid has used all his cooldowns, Seismic Shove, Unraveled Earth. I think it's going to tag him on the corner here, but they're clearly calling out, Lucian. Ayla tries to combo. He probably moves him like a fraction out, or, geez, I'm going to frame by frame this. I almost feel like the Seismic Shove lands. Yeah, the Seismic Shove lands, is going to be hitting him backwards. But then Ayla with his headbutt stops him from going backwards. So he doesn't take the Unraveled Earth damage. Pretty unfortunate. But the fight was probably lost anyway. Just fun to go into detail sometimes. Next big fight was at 13 minutes. I think I'm catching the replay of it here. Yep, 13-15. All right. 100 Thieves can't be fighting here. This was a macro mistake. Braum and Sion at this stage in the game are too strong. It's a Sunfire Cape, Sion. He's already got 2 kills. You literally have only Static Shiv on your Senna, and you don't even have your first completed item on Talia yet. 100 Thieves is too weak. I think they feel pressure, though, because they're against Azir Sion, and they want to make something happen, and this is just what they've done the whole year. They will take fights. When they win the fights, they run away with the game. When they lose the fights, they get stomped. Remember, this team was negative win rate for 2/3 of the year before making that insane miracle run, playing 8 best-of-5s throughout LTA playoffs and LCS regional playoffs, or LTA North regional playoffs. Yeah, this is just a dumb fight. I don't think there's any world where this fight actually works. They get absolutely run over, and they fall really far behind in the game. I don't necessarily feel the need to continue to review this game because I'd say their team comp gets outscaled. I think they gave away Sion in a bad slot. I think they lost the early fight at Grubs that they needed to win. And then after that, they would have needed to stall to maximize their chances of winning the game, but they continued to force, and HLE has very good hands, has no fear, and just obliterated them. So game turns into a pretty big stomp after this. But I do think this is kind of like the T1 game in a sense, where once you fall behind that much, there's no coming back. Game ends 24 minutes, 26 kills to 4. Zeus sets an international game record with 8 kills on Sion. The previous record was 7. So congratulations to him. They move to 2-1. And that moves us to a very interesting situation now. So we still have the 0-2 games tomorrow that's going to be eliminating either Fnatic and MKOI or PSG and VKS. But let's look at these brackets that we have moving forward. 2-1 bracket, CFO, FlyQuest, G2, GenG, HLE, TES. So we know we'd love to see FlyQuest G2. It would be the energy G2 of 2023. It will be wildly unfair to the LCK and the LPL, but I would appreciate it. I think G2 and Fly would also be comfortable with CFO. As good as CFO has looked, as close as they were to making it through 3-0, I still think you'd rather play them than GenG or HLE, for sure. I think TES is a team that is maybe kind of on the same level as CFO, but I'd still probably favor TES a little bit in that matchup. That's a tough one, though. CFO has definitely looked better than TES. GenG, HLE, I think, are in the tier of their own. G2, Fly, CFO, TES. As long as any of those 4 teams don't draw those 2 teams. So, the most tragic but entertaining draw is HLE, GenG having to battle each other, and then these 4 teams battling each other for the final 2, or for the final slots, because 3 of these teams are going to be going through for sure. 1 and 2 bracket. 2 of these teams in the 1 and 2 bracket, BLG and T1. You don't want to play them. You do not want to play either one of these teams. T1 scales throughout the tournament. I think the only reason they're here is their drafts have been awful. Their CFO draft was bad, and I think their GenG draft was really bad. And that's those are their two losses. They need to figure something out pretty quick. They're going to have like 3 or 4 days before they have to play their 1 and 2 matchup. These are the 2 world finalists from last year, BLG and T1, that are going to be playing. Either way, Team Secret Wolves, 100 Thieves, the winner of Fnatic Koi, which I think is going to be Koi, and the winner of PSG VKS, which I think is going to be PSG. Who knows what's going to happen? So much is going to depend on the draw. But that's it for today's episode of JLXP. I forgot to ask for likes and subscribers, so I just know I'm going to look at the analytics, and this episode's not going to have as many likes and subscribers. But I appreciate the comments. Let me know what you think about the player grades, about the format switches. I personally felt a lot more comfortable today managing the clips throughout the episode, so thank you for the feedback on the clips last time, that you enjoyed it. It made me want to do it again, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 5, the first elimination day of the Swiss stage. See you then.